Hello, seekers of true crime intrigue. John Joubert was a young and intelligent man with a dark secret. Born in Lawrence, Massachusetts in 1963, he had a seemingly normal upbringing. However, beneath the surface, he harbored violent and sadistic tendencies that would eventually manifest in a series of brutal murders. On September 18, 1983, in Bellevue, Nebraska, 12-year-old Danny Joe Eberle was walking to a nearby convenience store to buy Halloween candy. As he walked along the busy highway, he was approached by John Joubert, who was then a 20-year-old Air Force airman stationed at nearby Offutt Air Force Base. Joubert abducted Danny at knife point and forced him into his car. Terrified and defenseless, the young boy was driven to a remote area in the nearby Woodford Hills forest. There, Joubert subjected Danny to unimaginable horrors. He sexually assaulted and tortured the boy before ultimately murdering him. 3 days after Danny's disappearance, his lifeless body was discovered in the Woodford Hills forest. The scene was gruesome, and the police were immediately alerted. An autopsy revealed the horrifying extent of the torture and abuse Danny had suffered before his death. The investigation into Danny Joe Eberle's murder led law enforcement to John Joubert. Suspicion fell on him because he had been seen in the area where Danny disappeared, and he had a history of sexual offenses. When confronted by the police, Joubert confessed to the abduction, sexual assault, and murder of Danny Joe Eberle. He also admitted to another murder. John Joseph Joubert was born in Lawrence, Massachusetts in 1963. His childhood appeared unremarkable, with no overt signs of violence or dysfunction. He was a bright and academically successful student, earning a scholarship to the exclusive Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts. However, beneath the surface, Joubert harbored disturbing and sadistic tendencies that would later manifest in his criminal activities. During his teenage years, he became increasingly obsessed with sexual violence and murder, keeping a diary filled with disturbing fantasies. In 1982, Joubert joined the United States Air Force, stationed at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. During this time, he began acting on his violent fantasies. He committed his first known murder in 1982 when he killed 13-year-old Richard Stetson in Maine. The crime went unsolved until Joubert's later confession. On September 18, 1983, while stationed in Nebraska, Joubert committed his second known murder, the abduction and murder of 12-year-old Danny Joe Eberle. This heinous crime sent shockwaves through the community. After Danny's disappearance, a massive search effort was launched, but it wasn't until 3 days later that his lifeless body was discovered in the Woodford Hills forest. Police quickly identified Joubert as a suspect due to his suspicious behavior and history of sexual offenses. When confronted, Joubert confessed to both the murders of Danny Eberle and Richard Stetson. In 1984, John Joubert was convicted of the murders of Danny Eberle and Richard Stetson. He received 2 life sentences in Maine for Stetson's murder. In Nebraska, he was sentenced to death for Danny Eberle's murder. After years of legal battles and appeals, John Joubert was executed by lethal injection at the Nebraska State Penitentiary on July 17, 1996. His execution marked the end of his reign of terror and brought some closure to the families of his victims. Joubert was a highly intelligent individual who excelled academically. He received a scholarship to the prestigious Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts, showcasing his intellectual potential. He enlisted in the United States Air Force in 1982 and was stationed at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. It was during this time that he committed his first known murder, 13-year-old Richard Stetson in Maine. The murder of Richard Stetson went unsolved for some time. It wasn't until Joubert's later confession that the authorities connected him to this crime. Joubert maintained a diary filled with disturbing fantasies of sexual violence and murder. This diary became a critical piece of evidence in his later convictions. Joubert's second known murder was that of 12-year-old Danny Joe Eberle in Nebraska. The crime was particularly gruesome, and it shocked the local community. Law enforcement identified Joubert as a suspect due to his strange behavior and history of sexual offenses. He confessed to the abductions and murders of both Danny Joe Eberle and Richard Stetson when confronted. Joubert was convicted of the murders of both Danny Eberle and Richard Stetson. He received life sentences in Maine for Stetson's murder and a death sentence in Nebraska for Danny Eberle's murder. After years of legal battles and appeals, John Joubert was executed by lethal injection at the Nebraska State Penitentiary in 1996. Joubert's execution marked the end of his reign of terror, which had terrorized Nebraska and Maine. leaving a trail of horror in its wake. His crimes had a profound impact on the communities he targeted, raising awareness about child safety and leaving lasting scars on the affected families. John Joubert's case serves as a chilling reminder of the complexities surrounding serial killers and the importance of early intervention and mental health support for individuals exhibiting violent tendencies.